The destruction of tens of thousands more cows could be the price of saving the Florence summit. If Britain says it makes no sense on health grounds, why does it look like we're set to submit?
Good evening. The end of the beef war may be in sight. The European Commission agreed tonight a stage-by-stage formula which it believes will lead to the British policy of non-cooperation being lifted at the European summit in Florence on Friday. It involves concessions from Britain expected to include the slaughter of more cattle, a cull which the British say is unnecessary. So what price would John Redwood agree to pay? And would it be acceptable to Britain's farmers? In Washington, a Senate investigation into the Clintons' land deals accuses the White House of deception and abuse of power. But does America care? I'll be asking a representative of the committee to re-elect the president, whether his leader isn't now damaged goods. 4 goals to Holland's 1 puts England spectacularly through to the quarter-finals. Scotland score, but go out. As the RSPCA prepares to debate whether to try to make scenes like this illegal, we report on the infiltration of the organisation by supporters of hunting and a lot of others who couldn't care less.
All this seems to me to be getting very political, and I don't think it should be political, the RSPCA. There's enough political nonsense goes on all over the country without bringing it into the RSPCA, which is supposed to be an animal welfare society, I thought.
It's unlikely that the outcome of the beef war will be as decisive or as favourable as England's spectacular 4-1 victory over Holland tonight. We don't know the price that Britain will have to pay to get the European ban lifted. The Commission says the deal's only on if the non-cooperation policy stops at once, otherwise the whole thing collapses. Downing Street says the policy stays till the ban's lifted. The European Farm Commissioner will figure out the details tomorrow, while Eurovets haggle over the science. The mood of hostility in Europe is such that any further squabbling between London and the rest of the Union will go down very, very badly. Gordon Brewer reports now from Strasbourg.
A short while ago, Celine Britton emerged from a meeting of the European Commission and told me the Commission have agreed a set of proposals to be put to the British government. Celine said he was confident the British government could accept those proposals and that the policy of non-cooperation in Europe could be lifted either before or perhaps more likely during the Florence summit. But it's clear the British government has a long way to go to re-establish its credibility. While the marathon session of the European Commission was going on, members of the European Parliament, Conservatives with a small c, the Christian Democrats, who are the Tories' main allies in Europe, were telling me they're fed up with Britain and its policy of non-cooperation. Their main worry now is that Britain will appear to have profited from what they see as blackmail. First off the mark was Wilfred Martens, a former Belgian Prime Minister and currently head of the main Conservative group in the European Parliament. He turned up at a news conference and suggested Europe take Britain to court for breaching the Treaty of Rome. I thought maybe Mr. Martens was just having a bad day, but then I ran into his colleague Fernand Herman.
British government has to finish with that kind of tactics and come back in the line. Otherwise, we will be forced to put them to court, and we will change the treaty in a way where 14 countries against one will continue to do something without the British. That's the kind of thing we propose.
All the MEPs I spoke to agree with Europe's vets that more British cows will have to be culled. That could mean 60-odd thousand more than the 80,000 agreed already, Douglas Hogg said in London today. The line from Strasbourg, restoring consumer confidence comes above all else.
If even the veterinary committee, which was not so negative to Britain, has such a position, the more you have to see that the health committee of the union has its concerns, and also the consumers in our countries have their concerns. They should think from the consumer side.
But there's an overall political concern here. The Europeans believe they're being blackmailed by Britain, and they simply can't afford to be seen to be giving in.
Blackmail is not done in the European Union, and that blackmail will not have results, because if you give it a result today, many countries afterwards will use blackmail, and then we have a blackmail European Union, and that is what we never want.
Amidst such hostility, British Conservative MEPs are almost desperate for any sort of deal which can bring this crisis to an end. And the signs are that with tonight's meeting of the European Commission, they may have got it. The message from the Commission is that the British government has not got everything it wanted, and the final details of the agreement remain to be drafted tomorrow. That's always something of a hostage to fortune. But when I spoke to Sir Ian Britton, he was upbeat.
The Commission has approved the approach that was already outlined on behalf of the Commission at the Council of Ministers yesterday. That is to say, a concept which I hope will lead to an agreement in the European Council. The concept is that Britain will be asked to do certain things based upon the framework document that Britain has itself put forward, and that as each one of those things is done, the Commission will confirm that it has been done and take the advice of the scientists that it's been done and it's in order, and there will then be a gradual, stage-by-stage lifting of the ban. That's the concept.
There are no new proposals outside the British framework which the British might balk at implementing.
Well, the British government will have to make its own comments on what the Commission puts forward. I think that, as you know, the British framework plan has already been the subject of discussion. Britain has never said that that is the last word. I don't believe that what we have come up with involves anything that should be impossible for Britain to agree to.
But there are still problems. There's no timetable in the European Commission proposals. The Eurosceptics won't like that. And it's highly unlikely Europe will agree to implement a framework agreement unless the British government agrees now to stop its policy of non-cooperation. And then there are Europe's vets. They meet tomorrow in Brussels and may well repeat demands that Britain agree to an extra cull of more than 60,000 cows. Despite tonight's optimism, this crisis could still go to the wire.
Well, while Britain's representative in the Commission, Sir Ian Britton, may believe whatever conditions tonight's plan requires of the government will be acceptable, farmers and Eurosceptic MPs here may take a different view. In a moment, I'll be talking to representatives of both of them. But first, the Agriculture Minister, Douglas Hogg, gave MPs a chance to quiz him on the government's likely response to demands for a further cull and the chances of success at Florence at a Commons meeting earlier today.
Do you expect there to be a framework for lifting the ban agreed at Florence?
I can't tell you that, Mr. Jones. It depends upon the willingness of the European Union member states and the Commission.
It was all very civil. Mr. Hogg was up before the Tory-dominated Agriculture Select Committee this morning, but despite having its Eurosceptic element, it was hardly a grilling, not even a light toasting. The committee was a bit bothered about press reports that another 20,000 cows born in 1989 to 90 were to be added to the 80,000 odd already earmarked for selective culling. Mr. Hogg put them right. It was far worse than they thought.
I don't recognise the figure of 20,000. If the cattle in the year 89-90 were to be the subject of a compulsory cull, and that is not our proposal, the numbers are around 67,000, and I don't know what the 20,000 is that the press have been referring to.
In other words, an awful lot of extra cows. Would the government be prepared to sacrifice them for the sake of a deal? Mr. Hogg appeared to concede that as they'd already agreed the principle, there was no reason not to take it back a year earlier.
You could argue that it goes to the question of market confidence, and it is undesirable that a country such as the United Kingdom, which prides itself on the quality of its livestock and agriculture, should still, 10 years after this condition first became identified, have, say, this year, 8,000 confirmed cases. And therefore there is a case for reducing the incidence of BSE if you can. But I have to say again, it is not a case driven primarily or at all by human health considerations.
So was that a yes? Not quite. Fury from the farming community could be a stumbling block, all the more so because finding the beasts wouldn't be easy. Farmers were only obliged to register births for infected herds in 1990.
The answer is the records are were not mandatory, and therefore you would at the very best be depending upon the goodwill and acquiescence of the farming community, and that, as the records